Hello, hello,
What's
everybody.
going on, folks?
Camille here and Gaetan. I thought you would introduce yourself.
Oh, okay. Hi, folks. My name is Gaetan. I'm glad to be back. I've been away for quite a while, so glad to be back to kind of like discuss what's going on in the Congo. And I am happy to be with Camille, our New York City coordinator. How are you doing,
Yeah.
Camille?
Doing okay, doing well. Happy to be here and do this meeting. Yeah, shall we just like jump in with some updates? Um, so there's been a lot of things that have been happening on the ground. With today, there was a UN
Mhm.
meeting in Geneva that went pretty well according to um, Teresa, our Minister of Health, Madame Therese Wagner. Some of the specific points that were one where, sorry, I'm pulling it up as we're speaking, that there is condemnation about violations of human rights, that
Mhm.
there are denunciation explicitly about the explicit um, support of Rwanda, of M23 backed by Rwanda and its immediate retreat. There's also going to be an independent, c'est quoi enquête? Because I'm translating this
Yeah.
live. Yeah, an
Yeah.
independent.
Actually,
No, go for it, Gaetan.
they got it this morning. Where 47 member states of the UNHRC, the Human Rights Council, they were discussing literally on whether or not they should have a resolution regarding the security situation in the North and South Kivu, and sort of like allowing the establishment of an independent investigation um, to kind of like shed the light on the recent atrocities committed by Rwanda and its proxy in our country in the Congo. So, as maybe people probably know or read about it, there has been when Goma fell in on, I think it was on Sunday. It was first reported, 2, 3 days later that at least 900 people had died, and even the International Red Cross was saying that that number was underestimated. That there are actually more and more bodies that the numbers should expect to go up. And then it was reported later, I think a couple days ago, that they had buried at least 3,000 bodies and people. Really hard to differentiate if they were like civilians or military personnel. It was kind of hard to identify the bodies when you follow what the UN is saying about that. So not just that, not just the fact that there were like 3,000 people who have died so far, and many more still waiting to be buried in the morgue. You also have about 2,800 people injured. So they also had, in the midst of this chaos and in something that was like a battle in the Goma city, which is twice as that has twice as more population of, twice as a population of Washington D.C. They uh the prison of Goma was attacked, and that's also another sad news that we got from the ground. The prison of Goma was attacked, and the men were able to flee, to escape, but unfortunately women, 167 so far counted, were raped and before getting burned alive. And that's kind of the news that is getting out of Goma, and that's why there was this emergency to kind of like discuss what could happen. From what I've been reading and also getting some intels on what's happening, the M23 and run the governments have not been able to allow uh, a humanitarian corridor, and even for the activists or for the humanitarian help to kind of like coming and investigate. So they need really like a UN mandate to force to run the governments to uh, allow the international community to essentially come in and investigate the what is obviously a war crime and crime against humanity, having people burned alive and having 167 women raped and a death toll of like 3,000 people. That speaks volumes on the kind of like atrocity that we have seen in the Congo for the past 1 week. So yeah,
Mm. Yeah, and like the independent investigation that was approved today is also going to backtrack starting like from January 2022. So it's about current conflicts, but they're starting with January 22.
yeah,
And so that's some of the news on the ground. There was a Guardian article that came out today about that reported Rwandan troops dying in large numbers in DRC, despite official denials
yes,
of roles. And
yeah.
yeah, and then the article also talked about a revised up to like 7,000 Rwandese soldiers are
Mhm.
probably on Congolese soil.
Yeah, yeah, it's really fascinating when you listen to Paul Kagame's interview with the CNN, where Larry, the CNN correspondent, he asked Paul Kagame where his troops were, and then his response um, got me so mad. He said that he didn't know, right? That he didn't know where his troops are, and then even Larry responded or replied, "But you were the commander in chief," and he said ironically, that I don't know everything, right? And
Yeah,
we
there are
talking
many
about
things that I don't know.
exactly. We talking about a man who knows exactly. He's been saying that for years, and that has been the pretext that he has used for the past 30 years. He has been saying that the Congo is housing the FDLR, who is a militia groups that um, whose members are part of some of the members are part of the genocide that was committed in 1994 in Rwanda, right? And he can say it, and he they have been doing that for 3 decades, telling you exactly where exactly the FDLR are located in the Congo. He can tell you exactly, uh, uh, you know, everything that is happening within the Congolese government. But when it comes to his own troops, he doesn't know where his troops are, right? So when you read the latest UN report that was published in December, I think it was December 27th of this literally past December, right? Like a couple months ago, and you read that report, the report says that the RDF, the Rwandan Defense Force, has been systematically supporting at M23. Like they have been offering a systematic support to the M23. We're not just talking about weapons. We're not just talking about um, we're not just talking about ammunition. We're also talking about boots on the ground. That the Rwandan Defense Force, that the RDF, the Rwanda's government has been providing to the M23, to its proxies. So it's not even at this point. It's not even a proxies fighting. It's literally the Rwandan government fighting. And why am I saying that? Because Rwanda, being this closest ally of the US, has been receiving funds not just from the United States. They have been also receiving funds from countries like France, right? That has been using Rwanda to protect its interests in Mozambique with total energy, right? And then Rwanda has become great at exporting its soldiers because they know that they can gain leverage when they offer military personnel and soldiers and boots on the ground for missions that the European Union or that the US does not want to do. A little bit like Israel is doing in the Middle East right now. So then you have the president of Rwanda, right, in Mozambique, and they get $20 million from European Union, or I would say France, to be able to exercise to do that job. And they're also present. Rwanda is also the Rwanda government uh, within the UN. The Rwanda's soldiers, military, they are presence in Central Africa, right? Republican CRR, Central African Republic, again within this UN mandate. And on top of that, the Rwanda's governments have been receiving military support in terms of like funding and military equipment from Poland. And we know that because in 2022, uh, they even, it's all over social media, there is this military agreement between Poland and Rwanda, and Poland is a member of the European Union, and they're also a member of NATO, right? So when you have such an actor like Poland, like I mentioned, NATO country, a EU country, providing you with military contracts, we're talking about like high tech military equipment, right?
Yeah, like
That even
drone
the UN.
disruptions and like all this. Yeah.
Exactly, right? That the UN is being able to look at the M23 supposedly that they're fighting, and then they're like, uh, and then if you want to put yourself on mute because there's a
Uh,
yeah, yeah, there you go. Sorry. And then there was the even the United Nations, when they described at that time a couple years ago M23, and they were saying that a conventional or stereotypical African army, right, or African militia that we see with like some jersey on and Jordan. Now, like they are actually operating as a conventional army with weapons that surpass the United Nations weapons. Because something that I've come to understand is that when countries send their soldiers or their troops at the UN, they're also not, and that's also for strategic reason, they're not necessarily going to share their capability, right? They're not going to provide essentially their latest tech and see and say that, hey, this is the weapons that we have. They're probably going to send their like second and third generations, right? But with the agreement that we've seen with Rwanda, with Poland and Rwanda, between France and Rwanda, you see that the Rwanda has been able to get um, for what the M23 is currently doing in the Congo, like again, high tech weapons at the point that even current for almost 2 weeks now, the Goma airspace has been closed. So there is absolutely no way to get to Goma. Any sort of, you can think about like reinforcement from the SADC that is also present, South African force, ammunitions, and even for the civilians in terms of food, right? Because as you know, the roads condition are really bad. So you want to go to Goma, right? You either have to fly directly to Goma, or you have to fly, and some people have been doing that, to Rwanda or Uganda and just drive it. Usually you fly to Rwanda and you just drive. But with the context of the war, obviously you cannot do that. So that article that you mentioned, the Guardian article written by two great writers, and one of them is Michaela Wong, that I really appreciate with her work. She mentions that on top of those 4,000 soldiers, 34,000 soldiers that the UN mentions in the report published a couple months ago, you also had an additional thousands, an additional batch of thousand soldiers that came in to pressure or to help the offensive, so that Goma could be seized, right? And that's why the number is at 7,000. the number that I was that w- that I was getting was 10,000, even special forces, but that's not that info has not been confirmed. But I think 7,000 is a conservative number that we also read in in that article, and that so those soldiers, because of how Paul Kagame has been saying that he doesn't know, because right now he cannot admit that his forces or his troops are in the Congo. That will be uh, openly admitting that he's violating international law, right? Like he cannot admit that. So he had to. You're on mute, so I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah, no, I was saying that
Yeah.
like I completely agree, and but like I also not but I think that the Geneva conference also did designate Rwanda as a party in the conflict, right? So it's like in this way, like it is. I mean, like what if we like stand by this decree? It's like it's no longer like just like Rwanda is now officially part of the conversation in the conflict, as opposed to like just saying M23 rebelled backed by Rwandese forces. It's also now like they're acting for like they're like it is now recognized that it's a Congo Rwanda invasion conflict and that their support of M23 is condemned. Now, will the actions follow? Will sanctions follow? That we haven't seen a strong pull from the international community or these, but like those are some of the wins of today's convention.
Yeah, yeah. To me, it's really crazy how Rwanda is able to operate in the Congo. Like I said, like really similarly to to how Israel operates. Like three peacekeepers have been killed so far, right? And on top of those three peacekeepers, you also have
I
about
think the
like
number is at
14
14. Oh, sorry,
the
go for it.
peacekeepers in terms of like UN, United Nations,
Mhm.
because something to understand is South Africa, and that was also the argument of Paul Kagame, right? That in terms of UN, United Nations soldiers, only three have died. But um, when you add SADC forces, like South African forces, which is there in a different separate mandate. They also call themselves peacekeepers, but that's separate from the United Nations. Then that number can like goes all the way up to like about 14 soldiers, and even um, South Africa, I think they declared today that it was a national mourning day or something like that to just pay tributes to those who for the soldiers who have died, right? But to me, it's kind of crazy that Paul Kagame can wage a war on the people of Congo, and he has been doing that for 30 years, and he can come in a country, invade that country, occupy that country, plunder that country, kill in the process not just civilians but also UN peacekeepers, right? And also openly threat a sitting president like of South Africa that hey, if you want a war, we can we can have it anytime, right? And and that circle of violence I think needs to end, and
Mm-hmm.
it needs to end so that we can finally establish justice for those who have perished, not just this current war but also the past one, right? The UN
Mm-hmm.
mapping exercise report published in 2010 talks about at least 5 million people who have been killed during this war. And on top of that, it also mentions the type of crimes, if brought in front of a court, could be the key actors, including the government of Rwanda and Paul Kagame, could be found guilty of war crime, crimes against humanity, and genocide. We already have the co-founder of M23, Bosco Tanganda, who's right now serving 30 years in jail at the Hague. Right, he was arrested after the in 2012, after the M23 was defeated. He retreated to Kigali, and he went directly to the US embassy in Rwanda. And then from there was a direct flight for him to the Hague. That's why he was transferred. He was then trial. He was found guilty, right? But we cannot continue to have the same people. When you look at Sultani Makenga, who is right now leading the military branch of the M23, he was there alongside um, uh, Bosco Ntaganda. And if you read the same 2012 report, it talks about that the chain of command of M23 at that time was James Kabarebe, who is the current. Minister of International, who is the current Minister of International Corporation of Rwanda, and used to be the defense, the national security advisor of Paul Kagame. And prior to that, he was Minister of Defense, and prior to that, he was the Army Chief of Staff in the Congo. So it's really a circle of violence. And when we see Rwanda that thinks that thinks that they can uh, literally invade a country and continue to plunder.
Yeah, and like speaking of ending this cycle of violence, like what hope or like what sentiments you have or information about the upcoming SADC and EAC meeting?
I think just like the previous peace accords and negotiation that the Congo took part in, if justice is not at the center of it, like I mentioned, we can expect in few years for Rwanda to prop up another armed groups and find the Congolese face and say that that's a rebellion, that's about ethnic cleansing or ethnic conflicts or rebellion, right? That we have seen when when Mobutu was overthrown in 1997. Prior to that, there were a negotiation between him and Kabila, who was the face of that armed groups, Laurent Kabila, like the father. And even Mobutu at the time, if you watch the documentary about that agreement, he was afraid to actually meet up with, and it was actually really iconic moment, like facilitated by Nelson Mandela. May his soul rest in peace. He was afraid to come out because he thought that he was gonna get killed, and just like Laurent Desire Kabila as well, right? So they had that peace accord. Laurent Desire Kabila ended up overthrowing Mobutu in 1997, and his armed groups was backed by Rwanda. And then when Kabila, the father, asked his allies, Rwanda and Uganda, to go back to the country so that he can strengthen the army, they got upset. Kagame got upset. How dare you send us back home and you no longer want us to have a piece of this cake that is the Congo, to the mineral resources, $24 trillion in mineral resources. How dare we are the one who put you there, right? So what they happened, I don't even think that the people that left the Congo, including his army chief of staff, James Kabarebe, as I mentioned, there was also Eric Munienge, who was who's currently the ambassador of Rwanda in Egypt, but he was the chief of police in Rwanda. But in 1997, he was the number two of the national intelligence for on the military side, right? So you could see how the Rwanda's government has had infiltrated the Congolese government at that time. So when they left alongside with
Wait, sorry, can you say that
Moise,
again? The
say
part
what?
about, can
Sorry.
you like re-explain again how the infiltration of the Rwandese government in the Congolese one?
So yes, so we had James Kabarebe, who was the DRC Army Chief of Staff at the time of Laurent Desire Kabila. He is currently serving as the Minister of International Cooperation of Rwanda. And
Mm.
prior to that, he was the National Security Advisor to Paul Kagame. And prior to that, he was Minister of Defense. And prior to that, he was General of the Army. And even in the mapping, the UN report of 2012, 2013, they said that the chain of command of the M23 was James Kabarebe, who was a general of the army at the time, right? So you also have Dan Munyanza, who in 1997, when Laurent Kabila overthrew Mobutu, the dictator Mobutu, who was there for 32 years, Dan Munyanza was, I believe, he was in charge of the national intelligence of the military branch of the DRC. He is right now serving as the ambassador of Rwanda in Egypt. And prior to that, he was in charge of he was the chief of police of in Rwanda, right? So these are just a few example of the people when Kabila asked them to go home, they went and stopped in Goma, and the next thing we know, there was a rebellion that started. But we all know now it has been overwhelmingly documented that the RCD, that so-called rebellion, was backed, financed, funded, and also provided with boots on the ground, just like today, right? By Rwanda, right? So you have a lot of people that we see, or maybe you probably heard Moise Nyarugabo, who was a senator, but at the time I think he was, I believe he was like an aide of President Kabila. You have Azarias Ruberwa, who served as the Congolese, one of the Congolese vice president between 2002 and all the way to 2006, and he was also member of parliament. And from between 2019 to 2021, he was the minister of decentralization under current president, right? So you have all these people from a particular ethnic groups, and that started this so-called rebellion backed by Rwanda. Then you move to right after the assassination of Kabila, which surprisingly, after his death, after he was killed, the peace talk went, smoother than before. He was assassinated in 2001, 2002. They had the accord in Sun City in South Africa, right? And that's when they came up with this unique government never seen before of one president surrounded by four vice presidents, which in all four of them, or actually three of them, were part of the armed groups. You had Zaid Ngoma, who was part of a rebellion, quote unquote. Um, you had Azarias Ubewa that I mentioned, who was part of the armed groups. You have Jean Pierre Bemba, who was part of an armed groups backed by Uganda. And then you had Yehodia Abdullah Ndombasi, who represented, I believe, the interest of the previous regime or governments whose president had just been assassinated, right? Like the father of Joseph Kabila. So then they had elections, and then again, same thing where Congo is trying to detach itself from Rwanda, and next thing we know, there is a so-called rebellion starting. That's the birth of the CNDP. Laurent Kunda was the co-founder of the CNDP. CNDP, just like the RCD, just like the AFTL, was backed by Rwanda. They had an accord, like an agreement in 2009, in March 23rd, 2009, that the same people said it today that the government never um, respected, right? Never honored that agreement. Laurent Kunda, when he was asked to step aside, Bosco Tangana took over as the leader of the CNTP. Laurent Kunda, I don't know, nobody actually knew what happened to him, but people said that he left and fled to Rwanda, right? Bosco Tanganda created the what's today M23, or co-created M23, and like I mentioned earlier, he's right now rotting in jail. So it was important for me to mention all these dates and all these elements of Congolese history that seems to be repeating itself, in the sense that what was asked to the Congolese people, no matter the government at that time, has never been asked to any other country in the world, where you are asked to sit down and negotiate with the people who are slaughtering civilians. Like, I have not heard of peace talks agreements with between, let's say, Israel or Hamas, for example, right? No matter what the conversation, the grievance are, like, I'm not hearing a conversation where between Russia and Ukraine where we ask to one particular group to integrate those elements in the army. They ask that of Congolese people to integrate all these people who have committed atrocities Before being arrested in 2012, Bosco Tanganda, just like Sultani Makenga, just like Laurent Kunda, have somehow, as people who say that they're Congolese, fought in Uganda alongside Paul Kagame, in Rwanda alongside Paul Kagame between 1992 and 1994, right? And they have committed from those dates up until now, particularly for someone like Sultani Makenga, because the rest are either dead or in jail. They have committed atrocities, but they were still integrated into the army as part of the peace accord. The other combatants were pardoned, like amnesty was given to like most, if not all, members of the M23. So you can see that we are moving away from the root cause that they even themselves say that the reason why they took weapons in the first place, which is ethnic. They said that we are fighting for survival, and I've been listening to some folks, M23 folks, and even pro Kagame folks saying that if it's about protecting yourself, talking about Rwanda, why like Claude Gatibuke usually says, why not just stay at the border, reinforce your border, right? Just bring reinforcement right there at the borders. No need to go deep into the Congo. No need to go, all the way to Goma. If it's really about protecting yourself, why are you intentionally targeting sites or regions that are really rich in minerals, like the Rubayas mine? Why are you essentially creating a parallel government in the Congo, in those mines, so that you can continue to smuggle illegally those minerals that you're stealing, right? Like, so again, these, I'm sorry that I really want like kind of like on a tangent there, but these uh, peace talk coming that will happen in Tanzania this weekend, to me, as long as justice is not at the core of the talks, we will be just going in circle. And I promise you, within 2, 3 years, and 5 years, 10 years, we're gonna be having probably the same conversation about why Congolese are not talking to these particular groups for whatever reason, whatever their grievance are.
Yeah. Um, can you, yeah, you brought up a lot of historical facts that I did not know. So thank you for the lesson. I will be taking notes. Can you also talk a little bit, if you know, about like the different peace efforts that have been going on, peace, like with the faith leaders in Congo right now? Like, what's the news on that front?
So s- something that I think we should keep separate, in the sense that what's going on in Goma, like I said, I don't like using the term rebellion for the reason that I've explained. It's an invasion, it's an occupation, and it's because we have nations that our leaders of those nations, I think, that are above the law, that they can invade a country with impunity, they can kill UN peacekeepers with impunity, civilians with impunity, rape women with impunity. So on the other hand, something also to mention is that the face that was used for the armed groups is someone's name, Kone Nanga. Kone Nanga is a very interesting figure because he used to be up until 2021, if my memory is correct, he was the president of the Congolese Electoral Commission between 2015 and 2021. And he in 2020 in 2018 or 2019, January 2019, he proclaimed Felix Tshisekedi as the president of the Congo, as someone who allegedly won the election, because days prior to him proclaiming the result, a law-abiding citizen, a patriots leaked the results, the true results of the Electoral Commission. That those data were leaked to the Financial Times, and you can look at that. They were leaked to multiple news report, French reports, and the evidence in that leaked data showed that Tshisekedi never won the election. So there was like some talks about like then what really happened. And Nanga is really clear. He's really frank now about it. He's really open. There was an agreement between President Tshisekedi and Joseph Kabila, and there were witnesses to this agreement. Nanga being one of them, the former president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, who was used, I think he still is one of the facilitators for the Nairobi Accord, uh, peace talks, and also the president of Egypt, Sisi at the time. I'm not sure if he's still president, and the current president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, who, as we know, has his troops engaged or involved in the Congo. So that's what Kone Nanga is telling us, and that's what people can, with like a little bit of fear because of the crackdown of the opposition happening. They're saying that we have since 2019 in the Congo an illegitimate president, someone who was never elected. So when you have someone who is placed to power, who's appointed and not elected, you're gonna have this person acting as if he's above the law, not respecting the law. And that's what we have seen for the past 6 years. And that's why he even tried, and up until the fall of Goma, to modify the constitution so they could run for a third term, which will be the first one under the new constitution. With instead of 5 years of a term, he would get 7 years, right? So you also had how he was able to enrich himself. Right after the elections, Kone Nanga, he was openly saying that he owns gold mines in the Congo. That now that his job is done, we were in 2019, he just proclaimed someone who never won the election. He will focus on his mines. I don't want to go in details how he even acquired those mines because it's a lot of money. So we talk about corruption there. But essentially, he owns some mines. And you have President Tshisekedi that will seize his mine, and not in a really just way, right? Like it's not like there was a trial and he decided to confiscate those mines. It was arbitrarily. He just decided to take those mines away from him. And Korenaga was not the only person to whom that happened. And you have Chisekedi when he was in power, when he was placed to power, it was because the West wanted to make sure that the Congo remains a Western property in terms of plundering the resources, in terms of fueling the electric vehicles, in terms of EV batteries, right? This green energy transition. And the West, particularly the US, was not interested to hear about China dominating like they have been in the past 5, 6 years in the Congo. So there was a pressure for Tshisekedi to part away from Joseph Kabila, to part away from China, revisit those accords with China, who is solely in the Congo for business purposes, right? But when you have a president who is operating through the lens of corruption, the only thing that he understands is money, right? And it's because of that corruption, it's because of money that he was able to seize all these mines and give it to his family members of people belonging to his tribes. So all of this way of governing created internally this fracture, right? Created internally this crack between the president of the Congo, Tshisekedi, and not just the rest of the population, but I want to say the rest of the political class, the rest of the opposition party. So for the past 2, 3 years, there are some folks in the opposition calling for unity particularly when facing the Rwandan invasion, and Tshisekedi had not been receptive of that call. And that's why after Goma fell, and then we've seen now that President Tshisekedi had 5, 6 years to do that, but for obvious reason, he was not interested in leading, he was not interested in governing. He hired mercenaries that we've seen 250. They were one of the first one to actually um, um, lay down the weapons. They were paid between $3,000 to $7,000, $3,000 to $5,000 per month, right? We had folks, and there was a documentary or an entire investigation by the BBC about where these mercenaries were coming from. Most of them were coming from Western Europe, right? And we're not talking about people who necessarily can fight. We're also seeing in that documentary from the BBC that there are like police officers, right? People who just needing more money to pay rent, right? So Tshisekedi hired those people to uh, constitute the bulk of the Congolese army. That also created some division within. Like, can you imagine, like, you are a Congolese soldier and you barely getting paid $100 a month, but then you see this person who's coming from a different country and he's making like $3,000 more, right? So that's why the Catholic Church came in and said that we have this happening. Congo is losing ground in terms of the land that we occupying, right? We are losing ground. So the Tshisekedi's government or regime is not in a position of force at all. And with the number of deaths happening in the Congo, we need to put an end to this war. And the way to do that, we're not going to sit there and wait for the international community to wake up and decide that to finally uphold international law. We've seen what they've been doing in Gaza, right? So let's not fool ourselves. So they took that initiatives to put again in front of President Tshisekedi the solution of at least trying to come together with the entire political class in the Congo, to the entire population, and then also trying to negotiate with the people who are currently gaining ground, right? And this is the whole process of at least the goal and the intent of the negotiation happening, that to push Tshisekedi to negotiate, because you cannot say that you don't want to talk to people, you don't want to negotiate with people who obviously have some sort of like upper hand over you, right? So that's where we are today. So it will be really interesting. The Catholic Church, they already met with Martin Fayulu. They met with who was the person that was actually the rightful winner of the 2018 elections and former member of parliament. They also met with Matata Ponyo, who was the former prime minister of the Congo, and he actually supported Moise Katumbi, former governor of the Congo and rich businessman. They approached him, and I think right now they're trying to see if they can also branch out even to those who unfortunately also are currently occupying Goma and have been involved in massacres and slaughter of civilians. So
Mhm. Thank you for that. We have a question from the audience. So, what responsibility do you believe um, that the Congolese government has in this whole affair?
like like I mentioned from the get-go, these governments never had the mandate of the people. I think that was a wrong departure, right? And but it again, to kind of like separate the issue of what's going on, because what's going on right now in the Congo with the number of death that we've seen, the death toll is an invasion. It is an invasion by Rwanda. It's an occupation. It is a plunder of our resources. Um, but the Congolese government does have responsibility in the way that they're supposed to protect the people, right? And just like it was done previously under Mobutu, when you see that you had 6 years to strengthen your military, you had 6 years to come forward, right, and say that, you know what, guys, I did not win the election, but let's come together, discuss, because we have at least a peaceful transition of power. Let's discuss and see how we can have elections. But what we saw instead was another rig election in 2023 where we had people of his own political party voting, right? Literally, they had the machine, the electoral machine in their houses voting. So I think there is an opportunity for the Congolese government to face their incompetency and to face their responsibility in terms of, yes, we couldn't do that, we should have done that, but now what's ahead of us, what do we have to do, right? What do you do when you are occupied? What do you do when you're plundered? What do you do when your people are being killed? And it's very important for this Congolese government to be more involved into honoring, upholding international law themselves, right? Because you cannot go and say that Rwanda is violating international law when you're also violating international law. So there is really that need. If there is anything that the United Nations is saying that the Congolese government is doing is wrong, like violating Article 3, I believe, of the Geneva Convention by hiring mercenaries, get rid of them, right? Because that will give you credibility. If you are somehow facilitating or honoring or allowing militia groups involved in atrocities to be part of the army, like working with the army, with the Congolese army, part away from them, like literally. And also the corruption. We cannot, in this time when a portion of the Congo is occupied, we cannot, I cannot comprehend that we still have some member of parliament getting paid 21,000 dollars a month. I cannot understand that the president of senates and the national assembly receive 200 to $300,000 a month. I cannot comprehend the minister will still receive $50,000 a month when a soldier fighting gets $100 a month. That's
Yeah,
criminal, right?
no,
So
it
these
really
are the things
is.
that the Congolese government needs to do, and they
Mhm.
needs to do that with honesty, and they needs to do that with truth, because at the end of the day, we are facing a reality that the Congolese government's numbers are counted, like literally, like, but we only have one country. So if there is a chance to have peace, right? If there is a chance to save the world, to save the Congo from this bloodbath, I think the Congolese government should take that chance. And if that means that they're gonna have to give up the powers, they're gonna have to um, open up the game in terms of, like, because I think for a few days in Kinshasa, like across the country, they restricted the internet access, right? Because they did not want the people to know what was going on in the Congo, what was going on in the eastern part of the Congo, right? And these are the things that really violate even the core values of what a democracy should be about. Like democracy is about freedom of speech. So the Congolese government, you know, if you really claiming that you were elected, you should not be opposed to freedom of speech. You should not be opposed to people telling you that corruption is wrong. You know what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
there are many things that the government should be doing, but one thing they should not be doing is continue to enrich themselves when the people are suffering, when the people
Mhm.
are getting slaughtered. Like it's
Yeah.
really that time to have this patriotic awakening, right?
Mhm.
Of facing the reality and thinking collectively, what can we do
Yeah.
to save the people?
For sure. Really well said. And speaking of things that we can do to save the people, I'm just going to run us through some action items, concrete steps that everyone, anywhere in the world, whether it is you're in the US, the European Union, South America, any other countries and continents, you can do these things. Um, the first of our action items is demonstrate at Rundi's embassies, join organized demonstrations, and yeah, really have our voices heard where we want the withdrawal of Rundi's troops and M23 out of the DRC and to provide immediate humanitarian relief in Goma and other places that have been taken. The second is really push the Don't Visit Rwanda campaign, urging public figures and institutions to cut ties with the entities that are invading Congo. So that's Arsenal, his football team, Paris Saint Germain, the NBA, Kendrick Lamar, Dave Chappelle, John Legend, Formula One, and yeah, so sports washing. And third is write a letter to, if you go to freecongo.org, there's already a huge letter. We're trying to gain more momentum. And that's for write a letter to your US Congress member. But if you are outside of the US, if you're in the EU, for example, write a letter to your EU to your European Union chairperson and asking for this demands that I think some of the demands that the foreign minister have, some of them are still definitely in place, like the immediate end to Rwanda's hostility and target sanction, as well as an embargo on all exports of minerals labeled as Rwanda, particularly coltan and gold. Um, yeah, you can also reach out to your UN member saying that you stand with the Congolese people and these are your demands. And then fourth is donate to our emergency relief fund in Friends of Congo. There are other great organizations who are doing great work on the ground. So wherever you can donate. And five is spread the word, really educate. Like I'm on this education journey still. We all are. But like Congo is really important to the world for the, like when he says, for the green energy transition, it's key. It's climate change. It's also important with the forest in the second largest forest in the west of the Congo Basin, but also the first in terms of CO2 capture. So those are some concrete steps that you can take to support the cause, and yeah.
And if I can add, if you are based in the US, visit freecongo.org and also like the concrete steps, particularly when it comes to sending the letter to a member of Congress, senators. It's easy. It's right there. You can do that. And if you are in Europe, Friends of the Congo um, has a lot of partners across the world, including in the UK and in Europe. And Congolese Action Youth Platform (CAYP) that has been working tirelessly to um, for the world, or for the Congolese government, for the world to recognize what's happening in the Congo, because we call this a genocide, a genocide for economic gain. And if you are in the UK, there are ways for you to also reach out to your elected official. Um, and there was also actions and that are being currently undertaken by Congolese Action Platform to contact Europeans, a member of parliament. So check out Genocast on Instagram or Congolese Action Youth Platform to get more details. Um, just as a way to conclude, I just want to say that the reason why we call it genocide for economic gain, as I mentioned at the beginning, is that for since the inception of the Congo, which was designed to be plundered in 1884 at the Berlin Conference, Congo was used to provide the West as provide the West with critical minerals, right? Rubbers, um, then it was ivory, and then it was uranium, and then now we've seen with the treaties like tungsten, tantalum, and tin, and coltan, cobalt, copper, and all that, you can name them. And throughout these times, from 1884 all the way to right now, they've always needed a middleman to do that. It was first Leopold II, then it was the the Kingdom of Belgium, and then it was individual like Mobutu that led the country for 32 years. Then it was briefly Laurent Desire
Yeah, right. And
Kabila,
also,
backed by the
wait,
yeah.
sorry, just want to interject with the Mobutu. It's like it's a government that they put in place after destabilizing a legitimate government, right? Like it was like
Yes,
after the
after
assassination
yes,
of
after they
Kabila.
assassinated a legitimate leader, Mobutu, they placed the CIA, the West, they placed Mobutu for 32 years to be that facilitator, that person that will facilitate the plan of the Congo. And then when Mobutu started to waking up, they got rid of him. They placed Laurent Desire Kabila. Then they placed his son. And when the son was trying to get closer to China, they got rid of him after leading the country for 18 years. And now they put another person that has never been elected, but in the midst of all these Congolese leaders, the hands of Paul Kagame of Rwanda and the stamps of Yoweri Museveni of Uganda were never really like far, right? But it's time to really, and I keep emphasizing that, like it's really time for the same international community from the same West, and also for the entire diaspora, African diaspora, to pressure so that we can retire all those dictators, that we retire those warlords that are killing, plundering the country, that we retire those who come to power not through the means of democratic elections, but through the means of guns, violence, and deception. That we need to retire all of them and give to the Congo and the Congolese people a chance for justice, a chance for peace, a chance for stability. And that has been the fight for Friends of the Congo since 2004, and even the members before that. We need to put justice at the center of everything.
Very well said. Yeah, very well said. And I think that with that we can end the live. So
Yeah.
Congo will
Yeah.
be
Thank you so
free.
much. And hopefully, yes. And thank you so much. And all the people who have been watching this. And I can see 436 of you live right now watching. Continue to share, continue to speak, continue to pressure. Uh, that we
Continue
need to
to
stop,
learn
right?
too. Yeah. Yeah, because we
Yeah.
really,
We need,
and like what you were saying is really true. Right? And then like I don't know if I had already shared this, that like yeah, it really is just the elites. It's like the elites who are stealing and plundering and killing, and it's like the elites of Congo, it's the elites in the US, it's the elites, all of the elites right now are abusing, and like as people, uh yeah, we really need to stand on our humanity and
yeah.
dig
Yeah.
those, yeah, create
Yeah.
like
We need to
different, because this is
continue
not a
to.
sustainable, it's not sustainable, we cannot keep on
Mhm.
having these every like 10 years, every 20 years. We need lasting peace in the region and in the world.
Yeah. And the same way in 2012, the people were able to pressure the government of the US and the World Bank and other institutions to withdraw aid to Rwanda. The pressure need to continues now. Like we need to continue to pressure all these institutions, all these countries to sanction Rwanda, to withdraw aid to Rwanda, right? We need to flood the streets, go to the Rwandan embassy and ask them to remove the troops, to free the Congo. We need to continue to talk to those organizations that are somehow finding ways to wash the image of someone who has done nothing but kill and plunder a country, right? We need to tell those people that they should not feel comfortable singing off over Congolese grave. And I think that's the right thing to do as human being, as activists, just collectively, because it is what makes this world a better place. It's the presence of justice, and it's the sentiment of doing the right thing.
Indeed. And with that, those are great last words. Thank you, Gaita.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and peace out, everyone.